Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, wherever you're listening to this LinkedIn Live coming to your screen. My name is Naishad Gadani, and I'm coming to you from Melbourne. And this is the 243rd episode of Career Care Package. And on today's episode, we are going to talk about another pain point for all of us, I would say, is called interviews. Um, and we're going to we've got some questions that we want to cover, but we would absolutely love to get your questions beforehand. If you've got questions, if you've got anecdotes, if you have got small pain points that you always struggle with, drop it in the chat box, and we will be happy to answer that, or we'll take a dig at that. We don't always come up with answers, but we will give it a red hot go as well. So please drop in your questions. We would love to answer them about interviews, or even after the interview what happens as well. So feel free to do that. And before we jump into the question, let's welcome Caroline Brown.
Thanks, Nash. I feel very welcome after that. We haven't done interviews for such a long time. And I think when we do segments on resumes and interviews, they're our most popular ones. So maybe we should do more of them, I think. But I think you get a lot of, I think that we make assumptions about just how skilled people are in interviews. And then we get these questions, you're like, oh, people don't know that. It's interesting what people Google as well, because obviously, I've been in recruitment and HR. I've coached people on interview skills. You've done a lot of coaching on interviews. You've been interviewing people and on the other side as well. So we've got quite a bit of insight to share. So good topic, good choice. Shall we get into it?
Absolutely, let's dig it in.
Okay, so this one I think is really interesting. A question about like how long does it take for an interviewer to make up their mind, to have a strong impression about you in interview? And I did some Googling today
Mm,
because I thought, oh, a couple of minutes, trying to think of times where I've made a decision. But between like 2 to 3, mean number is around 7 seconds. So people are looking
wow.
at your demeanor, your body language, and more importantly, what do you look the part, what you look like. So I found that quite shocking. And then what they're doing is they're filtering all the other information through that first impression. So if they get a good sense of your fit for whatever reason, then they're looking for ways to confirm that impression. If they don't, then they're always having to work hard in their mind to still believe your answers, I suppose. Like, can I believe what's coming out? Do I really see that? Is this that's a great answer, but still do they fit? Do I believe that answer that comes out of people's mouths? So I thought that was really interesting.
7 seconds. I think that
Mhm.
you just told me why I did not get many jobs.
Did you come in with a cigarette, a tinny?
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me? 7 seconds go
Oh,
right
you put
now
your
on
phone
Zoom.
down, did you?
Yeah, 7 seconds is bit too much. But I think reasonably we can all conclude that in a human to human interaction we do tend to decide very swiftly based on our past experiences that whether do I want to engage in this conversation, or am I and then okay, I've not selected this person, now let me try my hard to find if
Mm,
this person still do that. Now it doesn't mean that that cannot be turned around, right? It doesn't mean that you can't make the make it in your favor, right? But I think initial impressions do make a big difference. And I guess a lot of that depends on, obviously, on I think it would be different in a virtual interview because you're not really able to see that person's body language. You don't really
mm,
get the feel of it. But yes, in a face to face context, I think if not 7 seconds, and probably first 2 3 4 5 minutes, 5 minutes
mm.
would be a reasonable one that you would start to kind of the
Making
dial,
a final decision
making
in
a kind
five
of
minutes.
decision that whether this is
Yeah.
really, which is pretty weird, right? Because you haven't really gone through the whole process to figure out whether this person is kind of skilled enough or not, and do that. And I think we have seen that often, that we spend so much time on our resumes and cover letters and LinkedIn profile and everything else, but then it just depends on that particular day, and how do you respond to certain questions and how do you come across initially.
Mm,
That's what determines. We spend thousands of dollars to go and study data science and coding and engineering, and then they figure out that, oh no, what we are looking for is somebody who fits in the culture and who can
mm.
do this, and said, hang on, you're looking for skilled person, or you're looking for somebody who does
Well, they're
this, right?
looking for both. I mean, that's the thing. I think that that decision that people are making is like, will you fit in the cave? You know, like, do I feel safe? Can I see you in the cave getting along with the other people in the cave? So, or is it going to be hard to work with you? You know, on one hand, or if they want somebody to be the disruptor, is like, are you going to be, powerful enough in that kind of sense to, it depends, but they are looking for fit. It's, you hear of many, many people that regret that hire because they didn't think, the fit's not there, basically. So, but I'm interested in what you said about how to turn that around. Have you ever been able to have you ever gone into an interview and realized that, didn't go down with the bang instantly and then turn that around, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. That has happened. Um, and that was probably my initial years, where I was so stiff, and I would, you know, struggle to really connect with individuals.
Mm,
Obviously, since then time, I've improved myself. I think whenever I have struggled in interviews to come up with, not so much come up with answers, but how do I respond? I really swiftly look at, can I bring some emotion into my answer? Can I
mm,
really bring that extra zeal? Can I really drop some words that say that I've really committed to that, or I've really changed something, or I've really produced that kind of an outcome?
mm,
So it requires just a bit of practice. That happens with a lot of people. When you're playing a sport and suddenly realize, no, you're struggling, so you have to dig deeper. But you don't have that time.
mm,
You've got probably few seconds for you to really connect yourself and start to believe in yourself,
mm,
and say, you know what, I've not lost it. Because suddenly the mind wanders, and mind says, you know what, you've lost it, man.
mm,
There's no way that you're going to get a job, right? So it's kind of this battle that you are on with your mind, and what your mind the mind will always, in my view, will try to steer you away from any threat, and say, you know what, forget about it, you got the other interviews coming, why are you worried about it, right?
mm,
Those are the things that continuously goes on. So you'll have to really kind of hold on, not hold on to that, let it pass, and really bring some emotion and really intent there. And one of the things that people can do is to feel things as well. So if
mm,
you, for example, because if you've done mindfulness or yoga or meditation, whichever is your poison, you would find that they start with just observing where you are, then that's it,
mm,
nothing else. And sometimes what helps people is to hold on to their chair, and hold on to the table, to bring your sense of self back, that you are
mm,
now in the present now,
mm,
right? And can, so I think it, but that also, in my view, KB, requires just constant practice, just not about interviews, but also in
mm.
other situations as well that you deal with day to day life,
I
that it
think,
requires practice. Yeah.
yeah, it's one of those things of know yourself, like, and how you respond to pressure. Like, if you've got a task in the past that you have struggled with, how do you prepare for that? How do you prepare for an exam? What do you do to get yourself ready? But I like what you said about just bringing yourself in, your full self, into the interview, because essentially it is about connecting and relating and having a conversation. But I also think, like, I have trigger points about um, what makes me feel unsettled, and one is when I'm running late, when I don't know where the place is, where I don't feel comfortable in what I'm wearing, like, those sorts of things. So you've got to try and remove all of those before you actually sit in the interview room. But I think just going back to that cultural fit, because that's what we're talking about, is that you've got to understand yourself first. I reckon you've got to understand what's where you fit. What are your values, and who do you want to work with, and what kind of organization does that look like? Because then, if you don't fit in the interview, if somebody then that decision's made. You're not pretending to be something that you're not. um, so yeah, I think that would be my number one advice, is to try and do that kind of work beforehand on yourself, just to really sit down and think about what do I want that's going to make me happy,
Yeah.
in an interview or in a company. So,
Mm.
and dress the part, and dress. Look, I
Mm.
mean, I'm not saying about be something that you're not, but
Yeah.
it's the white coat thing. If I went into
Mm.
a laboratory job and wore a high vis vest and
Mm.
overall, people are going to go, get outside, KB, into the garden type thing. So, you've got trying to embody what it is that you want to be,
Mm.
and that goes back to knowing yourself as well. So,
Absolutely. I think knowing yourself is regardless whether you're in career transition, everything else, that's very fundamental. And I think I recently attended an interview, not recently, but few months back, and one of the thing was about, one of the area of challenge for me is to write, is written words, is a
mm,
challenge for me. And there was specifically, they were asking me about, what can you do and things like that in career services, and I said, I should acknowledge that, I can train people, I can write, I can create presentation, deliver training program, webinars, everything else. But if you're looking for me to develop a new material for website or
mm,
for your learning modules, I said I will need help with.
mm,
I'm not able to really put my thoughts into words that are relevant, that
mm,
will appeal to that audience.
mm,
I'm not great at that, and I will need some help with it.
mm.
But I was able to convey that because I did not want to portray a wrong picture at the same time. That yes, if you, yeah, I can do that, I can do that, and then suddenly find out that, oh God, I'm pretty crappy at it.
Well, that's like that
Um,
question about, which is what we had on the, like we
mm,
talked about, is how do you handle that question? What are your weaknesses? Or, should you talk about what your weaknesses are? Um, but you sound like you started off with what your strengths were, and
yeah.
then there's this bit that I'm not so great at. You know,
Exactly. And also saying that I will need some help with it. It's not that
yeah,
I'm not willing to do
okay.
it, right?
Yeah,
But I'm not an expert at that.
mm,
But it was also, I saw that the hiring manager said, look, that's good. Thank you for telling us
mm,
that you need help with, rather than I could say, look, don't give me that job because I will not be able to do it. Right?
mm,
That was one way of saying it, but the other way of saying it, that I can write, I can put some pointers, but I need
mm,
somebody who can eloquently kind of create a thread and create a
mm,
consistent story around it,
mm,
so that, because written word is viewed differently than if I
mm.
speak. And if I want to
Yeah,
explain the same resume concept to somebody, if I'm doing a video, it's different to somebody who
yeah,
just wants to read and make sense of it. That's
yeah.
different too. But another point to that, KB, weakness. Obviously, weakness is a question that a lot of people find it difficult. My theory around that is that the question is not aimed at you. It's not a cornering question. It's not a question asked by an ASIO that where were you on 5th of December 6 p.m.
Mm,
Right? It's not that question, right? It's a question that they want to know that whether you have a bit of understanding of yourself or not.
mm,
That's the whole point. And and I always ask people to remove weakness and
mm,
insert a word called area of improvement and
mm,
respond to it like that one of the current area of improvement for me is this. So
mm,
even though if you're responding it to like it comes across as that, well, you've you know your stuff and you are not
Mm,
really, making this as a weakness, but
mm.
saying this in a way that comes across that this is an area of improvement for me. And you always choose something that you have recently starting to turn
Yeah.
around.
I think so. But the other thing too on that is that, there are strengths and weaknesses for people that are good at jobs, right? So if you're a strategist, you're probably not great at detail. Maybe I'm just putting that out there. So it's expected that, what makes you good at big picture doesn't make you good at fine details. So whatever you're bringing up, like even in your example, that might not, the big part of your job might be generating the ideas to go out there versus proofreading or structuring, copywriting. So if you're in the right job, generally your strengths are matched with what's required for the role, and what you're not so great at is also part of that profile of that person in that role. And I think people do tend to get tripped up by that. And so, the thing about being self aware is like, why am I the right person for this job? Well, my strengths match the big things that I've got to deliver in this role, and I'm not going to get bogged down in the things that I shouldn't be doing. So um, I
Yeah,
think
that makes sense.
again
Yeah.
that's like the investment that you put in kind of
Mm.
career counselling, or considering what your strengths and weaknesses are before you actually apply, or before you sort of change your direction,
Mm.
or whatever.
Mm.
So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Another thing that I would say, KB, before that, you talked about something that like a trigger point, and
Mm,
that's a very valid thing. I remember many years back when I was delivering a lot of training program with Landmark Education, and one of the thing that we had to move from one building to the other building as part of the process, where we take larger group of people into smaller groups of people. And I know that the whole path was part of that whole pathway was dark,
mm,
and I know that my energy would drop in completely in that moment of darkness, and I
mm,
would never be able to get where my energy was before. And that was a trigger point for me. So I've observed in quite carefully that there are trigger points even before going to the interview. That could be that a path that you take, or
mm,
or you saw a red car and suddenly you felt, oh god, what is this, right? So I think being aware of what triggers certain negative responses
mhm,
is incredibly important. So you may not be able to completely eliminate it. Obviously, if you're United States of president, you might be able to eliminate a lot of things, right?
mm,
But you're not. You can't eliminate a lot of things. But being aware of what are the things that really triggers you before you go for the big interviews is
mm,
incredibly important. Then you got to figure out, what do I need to do? What can I do to manage if I'm triggered? Can I
mm,
call someone,
mm.
right? Or can I
Yeah,
write something? can i
yeah.
can i go and shout somewhere? What is something that you could do to really kind of lessen the impact of that trigger?
Mm,
Is what I would suggest people to think about those things.
mm. There's some wonderful books on getting in the zone, like, and how to actually. I was reading this book about a chess champion a few years ago, and about getting in the zone, like how he fast tracked getting in the zone of peak performance. It's fascinating stuff. We should move it to our second or third point, which is why do people ask, tell me about yourself, when they've got your CV in front of them?
Yeah, but it's like you've been to you've been to Great Barrier Reef. Everyone knows you've been to Great Barrier. They don't want to know that which airlines did you fly with, where did you live. They want to understand, how was the experience for you. That's what I want to
Mm,
know, not necessarily the logistics of it. And resume is logistics. Resume doesn't give people a story about yourself. And that's what they tell me about yourself. I like that one. And then you can use some of that. One of the things that you can use to drive is that, what is that about the job or the career that really gravitates you? What is your
Mm-hmm.
calling about that? You can
Mm-hmm.
start with that. Or something that really kind of a short story. I always say I'm an engineer turned career counselor, and that
Mm-hmm.
really hooks people in. What do you mean by
Mm-hmm.
you're an engineer? Now, if you see the resume, it doesn't have it. It's got
Mm-hmm.
logistics of it. That I've studied engineering and I've done that, but
Mm-hmm.
unless I make that connection that I'm an engineer, I'm a career counselor who wasn't prior an engineer, then I start with that, and that hooks people in.
Well, it's a
I
point of
changed my career.
curiosity, isn't it? It's like,
Exactly.
why? Why have you changed? But it's also reinforcing that you've made the decision to change. So anything that made you not like engineering is probably in, career counseling type things. So, yeah, I love that
Anything.
approach. Kind of,
Anything. Just curious. Just something which
yeah,
brings some a bit of curiosity around it, and then the focus is not to tell people the whole story. The
yeah.
focus is tell people important bits like
But it's also the
watershed
bit that you
moments.
want to talk about, right? It's
Exactly.
the bit that
Yes.
you want to talk about. It's like, how did I come from being this to this, and what do I love about it? So you can, yeah, I really love that approach. It's quite like I would instantly lean in and go, oh,
Tell
really?
me more.
Tell me more. But there's
Yeah.
another way
Exactly.
too that one of the guests that we had on the show a couple of years ago called it the Scooby Doo moment. Do
Yes,
you
I
remember?
remember. Forgot the name of
Still
the
laugh.
guest.
Uh, but it was basically
Yeah.
you could go on a long waffle. I started high school and went studied, and then I went from here to here to here to here to here, and blah blah blah. But he suggested one or two things, maybe along the lines of what you've pulled out, and then to say, but what's most relevant to you? Scooby Doo pops up
Mm,
is and then that's a bit of your pitch around
mm,
how excited you are to be a career counselor. You found your calling with that. You've got 10 years experience in doing that, and you've worked in diverse, whatever. But the Scooby Doo is like what, because I guess that's, you can lose people with that long
mm.
winded ramble. It's completely
Absolutely.
irrelevant, but gone, like, if you say those words, what's really relevant to you or
Mm.
relevant to this particular role is what I've done here. I kind of like
Absolutely.
that as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. Now, a lot of people ask that how long should it be? Well,
Mm,
it should be as much as you can make this interesting.
mm,
Obviously, you don't want to go for 5 minutes because nobody would find it interesting except yourself. Um, so I think a minute and a half is sufficient. 2 minutes maximum. I think
mm.
you'd probably be able to capture many things. And I suggest that just because tell me about yourself is some something that you
Well, it's
can
like, what do you want
actually
to know? There's such a story. like,
you can
yeah.
always a lot of people start with different things. Oh, where do I start with? Let me tell you this. So it's also kind of sets your personality as well.
Yeah.
That a lot of people have got that incredible ability to build a rapport with someone in in seconds,
Mm,
right? You're sitting down. So imagine that you're sitting down, you're having a look around, their office, their place, and then you're not suddenly sitting down and straight away starting it, right? It's not that way. You at least have got a couple of then a lot of people ask, oh, how did you find it here? Okay, how did you come here? It must be chilly outside. A lot of
mm,
those things actually happen, and you take some cues from it, and then
mm.
you drive that
Well, it's one of
from
those. I
there.
mean, people tend to ask it as a kind of icebreaker question without really, it's an icebreaker question if it's asked at the start of the interview, but they always have things that they want to know, which they're not relying on the tell me about yourself question to tell them. They'll have questions prepared. So
Yeah.
it's but people are looking, especially if you're more senior and in your
Mm,
communications or sales role, to see how you can structure your thoughts with an unstructured question, like your communication skills when you don't have any guidelines around it as well. So they're looking to see that kind of for that kind of information. So okay, so we covered about weaknesses. That was another one. One thing I really struggle with, and I know a lot of people struggle with, is the poker face. Like the interviewer that doesn't give anything away when you're being interviewed. Have you ever had one of those?
Yeah. I think we have had that many in life also,
Hang on, I'll do it to
right?
you now. See how you respond.
Yeah. No, I think we come across that, but it's the way you interpret that.
Mm,
You know, I remember one of the senior in leadership courses that we did. One of the question he get asked is, what if someone is sleeping and you are delivering this session, right, out of 200 people, right? Or what if somebody is yawning? And this guy
mm,
says, look, I just interpret that that person wants to consume not my what I'm saying, not just by ears but by mouth also. Or someone is might be sleeping. I said that person is intently listening to me right now,
mm,
right? So I can make that, and I think it doesn't come straight away. So you still find it that's a forced way to look at it, right?
mm,
By default way is that otherwise your energy will drop suddenly and said, okay, oh, you're a poker face, I am also a poker face, then I
mm.
will. Oh God, when is this
I think it
interview
brings
going
up
to
a
end?
lot of people's insecurities because as human beings, we look for cues and responses from people. So if you've got somebody that is not giving you anything back, it's really hard to actually
And
work
then
with.
you can interpret that must be a tough day for this person,
Mm,
must be a really challenging day. You don't know what people are going through,
mm,
right? But they still have to do the job. Similarly, you and I, or a lot of people, all the people listening to it, you still have to do the job.
mm,
Sometimes you've got an absolute cranky mood and you have had some tough things at home,
mm,
but you still do the job, and sometimes
mm,
those emotions shows up. Similarly, you have to understand that on the other side also people are going through some difficult
mm,
situations, and they for a few seconds they are showing up that, so you got to say, no, I'm really feel that must be a
mm.
tough day. But you're not saying it, but the moment you say that must be a tough day for this person,
You
it
can see it differently.
it frees you up from
Yeah.
there, right? And then you can say, you know what, I feel more compassionate
Mm.
to this person, and I'm going to have a chat with this person.
And
And even though
also
this
the other
person
thing is that,
continues to be this way, no
yeah,
problem with that.
the other thing is that they might be nervous. They might be their first or second time that they do interviews. They might be really introverted and not really feel comfortable with the whole process. They may not read cues that or they just may not know. So yeah, it is hard to work with because it does bring up everyone's insecurities in terms of I'm not being believed would be one of them. So I need to kind of rattle off or like what you do
Absolutely.
reflex in a reflex kind of way with that. But I like your kind of reframe. It's you just don't know what's going on the other side of the poker face, but hopefully you can have some interview down the path that is more engaging or two way or whatever. So
Sure. And
yeah,
sometimes we also come across as poker face, as somebody who's being interviewed as well.
yeah,
And that's kind of what we say, very relative term. Someone
mm,
who is an extrovert, someone who's outgoing, they may find you, even though you're smiling and saying, hang on, what is this person? Why is he
mm,
or she is not participating enough, right? So it's
yeah,
also a relative term as well.
yeah. All right, got a couple more. Um, should you talk about nerves? If you're nervous, should you say I'm nervous?
I think it depends on how do you structure that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell a quick story. I was delivering a session, and I knew that there were 25 people, and some of them were senior in human resources. Now, this is back in India. And for a moment, I felt that they are quite capable than me.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing I said, my name is Naishat Gadani, blah, blah, blah. And I'm really a bit nervous today because I've got, a lot of senior people from human resources, and they know, uh, a bit different things about human capital. And that's what I'm going to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to ask you to, I'm just acknowledging that I'm nervous. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to be professional and deliver what I'm here to deliver.
mm,
And then I saw that I felt a little relieved, but I also saw that the some of those guys actually can feel that their shoulders were really like kind of and relaxed a little bit
mm,
because they felt that that's how a human reaction is, and I'm
mm,
acknowledging that human reaction.
mm,
I've not achieved that amount of nirvana like Dalai Lama, that who would probably be able to deal with that by internal dialogue. I've not achieved that. I'm
mm,
acknowledging it. But as I said, it's who you are and how do you say that.
mm,
That's very important. If you say it in a way that, look, are you nervous? Yeah, a little bit nervous, and I think a bit of nervousness is good for the interview, right?
mm,
And then you can start with. So you are acknowledging that nervousness, and saying that a bit of nervousness is anyway fine.
mm,
Otherwise, you're not concerned about the success of it.
mm.
A bit
Thank
nervousness,
you.
a bit anxiety is good.
Yeah, I think it's what it drives you to do. I suppose it
Mm.
keeps you wanting to be better, or in that, in that scenario, or you realize it's a big occasion. I put a caveat on it. I think in some jobs, where you are expected to be under the spotlight and under the pump, um, more senior business development type role, I wouldn't be saying I'm nervous, um, because that's not the job. The job is to perform under pressure. So that, I think they would be expecting that you would have whatever you did to prepare for a big meeting, would be the same thing that you would do to prepare for a big interview. But I think that it is contextual as well. Like, you use humor with essentially use humor and vulnerability with the
Yeah.
audience, because the audience, um, you know, you probably read,
Mm.
like, it was appropriate in that scenario, because actually you were delivering a presentation. But yeah, I think it really, people can, honestly, people can see what your nerves are
Mm.
by your behavior, whether you're umming and ahhing, or whether you're speaking too quickly, or darting around the topic, that they can see that. So,
Absolutely.
um, yeah, I think it's probably more acceptable when a junior starting out,
Mm.
and
Mm.
but as you get more senior, where you're expected to
Mm.
perform, the preparation, they expect
Absolutely.
that you're self-aware enough and do the right sort of preparation, to be able to overcome whatever, nerves that you have, or not make them so obvious, I suppose.
Mm.
So, yeah. And then
Makes
there are
sense.
just bad interviewers that want to trip you up. So you probably don't really want to work for
Mm.
those organizations as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, okay. Do people still ask for what do you want to do long term, career, 5 years' time?
Yeah, I've seen people still ask those questions that, what's the 5 year, 10 year goal?
It's like five
It's
years to get out of here,
yeah,
10
it's
years.
like it's a very, yeah, it's a good question. You can actually turn that around into a really clever answer. The way I have
Mm,
answered that is, I'm not sure whether I'll be working as a career services director of a institute or I will be a project manager. But what I'm absolutely sure of that I'll be working around job seekers, whether that is
mm,
to help them change careers, whether that is to help them move up their career, whether that is to help them find work. I will be
mm,
working around those services, whether that's in a leadership role or whether that's a front role.
mm,
That's what I'll be working. That is absolutely clear for me because
mm,
I have dedicated myself that that's what my career is going to be all about.
mm,
And I think that's very true. And I'm not hiding that. It comes, but that comes with a real conviction that
mm,
I've done it and I really believe in what
mm,
I've created.
mm,
I'm really after this. And it's true. It's really true that
mm,
the whole thing is that whether I currently do career counseling or I would go and manage projects that I've done, but I know that what gravitates me is around employment and
mm,
helping people move from A to B. That's what gravitates me.
mm. So it's really, in this same sector, in this same realm, but it might be a different expression of it. So, yeah. Yeah, and again, I mean, people are looking to see what your long-term plans are and
Mm,
whether they match up their long-term plans, whether they can offer you those opportunities, whether you thought about what it is that you want to do, like at a level, like at a deeper level,
yep.
where you understand maybe what's out there in the marketplace in
Yeah.
terms of what's next. If you're dedicated, like for example, for you, if you're a career counselor, where do people go beyond, what's the next couple of
Mm,
steps so that you'd realistically achieve in 5 years? It might be team leader, it might be project manager, it
mm,
might be designer of services,
yeah.
and that you've done that kind of, well, I know what I enjoy now and I know what's ahead of me as well. So, yeah. Okay.
Mm.
All right. I've got my list here. So, thank you note. Oh no, no work related examples. So what if you ask that a question in an interview and you don't have a work related example? Say it's a star example.
So you meant that you can't find a
Yeah.
behavioral
So yeah,
response
you've been
from.
asked to tell me about a time where you've, I don't know, done blah blah, led a team.
Mm,
Team dynamic wasn't great.
mm,
How did
mm,
you resolve that? And you can't find a work related example. Is it okay
mm.
to give another another example from somewhere else?
Absolutely fine. I've done that previously. It is absolutely fine. A couple of things over there. One is you have to tell people that I'm going to use an example outside of work. Number
Mm,
one. Secondly, you must create a context for it. Because work is easy, right? I can say
mm,
I worked in Telstra and I used to do this. It's easy, right? But let's say, for example, if you're going to use that, you've organizing events and you've had no experience, but you work at the local, volunteer at the local footy club and you organize the raffle
mm,
night. So you got to say that, look, I'm going to give an example of my volunteering experience with the local footy club, where I am the event secretary, and my job is to organize every 6 months a fundraising event, which
mm,
involves around 100 people attending. So then I've given you the context in couple of sentences, and
mm,
everybody would understand that.
mm,
Then I can say that in one of the event that this is what happened, this is what action I took, and this was the result of it.
mm,
So I think it is absolutely possible for you to do that. Having said that, there has to be exception to that, not that you can use one example from it rather than 50% example. Now, this is also contextual, because if you have had a long employment gap due to looking after someone, to your own ill health, to raising family, and then you are returning, then some of those example would come from your lived experiences as well. But
mm.
you must create that context. You must tell the interviewer that this is why you are answering this question from this particular background.
I think it's good to set it up with,
Hmm.
um, like this is an example that has it's very similar parallels or very similar challenges. Say, for example, that you're using the example of, you've organised a raffle at the footy club, and it's like similar to where you're trying to bring different stakeholders on board in a corporate organization. It can be like herding cats. In fact, because everybody's volunteering, they don't have to be there, so you have to actually be even more persuasive. So you can kind of, you know draw people in by using like saying how it's similar, basically. And if you tell people that it's similar, they're not going to dispute that. If you can paint the picture of how similar it is, basically, or how even more challenging it is, because, like in that scenario, people don't need to do, nobody's directly reporting to you. They don't have to turn up. They don't have to do anything. So, yeah, I like the example, basically, of context there. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's very important. Creating a context is incredibly important.
Yeah. Thank you notes. What do you think about thank you notes?
100%. You
Yep.
must send.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it should not be like a lengthy thank you note. But
Mm,
few things that you can think of including. One is to kind of reinforce your commitment to the role,
mm,
telling people what are some of the salient points that you covered in the interview. And sometimes, the interviewer don't even ask those questions, and
mm,
you did not have the opportunity to cover about other things that you have done, which kind of complements to that.
mm,
So that's what you can cover. Sometimes it's also an opportunity for you to rectify some of the response that you've done. And you forgot to add something and you thought,
mm,
oh, maybe you must have misunderstood what I'm trying to say. So
mm,
that gives you an opportunity to really kind of clarify. A couple of other things in there. So you must send, if you plan to send within 12 hours of your interview.
mm,
And one of the thing is I would suggest to people is that once you finish the interview, don't do anything. Don't call your spouse, don't call your friends, don't call anyone. First of all, write down everything that happened with you in the interview in terms of your responses, in terms of what did you do well, what you did not do well, what you want to tell people that you forgot. Okay? So that's fresh. That's still a memory. Otherwise, after a while, that becomes thought. So
mm,
I think I've said that. I don't even remember that.
mm,
So I think that's how it really works. If you want to be more creative, well, you can send, I don't know, you can send a snail mail
mm,
with a really crafty, kind of a paper with beautiful handwriting. Get it printed and send it to
mm,
them. If you want to be more crafty, and put a QR code there, right? With your, you can record a video nowadays, and you can send that as a thank you note as well.
mm,
So there's a lot of things that you could do
mm,
to leave that impression that you are really interested, and also give a sense about your personality as well.
mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would absolutely do that because it makes you stand out. So few people actually do it. That you just that extra effort really does make you stand out. So we've got a question. Hi Nashad, can you please shed some light on how for entry level role or less experienced roles, the interviewer's behavioural questions can be answered? Can examples outside of work be used to answer? Yeah.
absolutely, Vivek. Absolutely, it is possible. But as I said, we got to create a context. What outside work you're talking about, because
Mm,
sometimes people don't know.
mm,
Especially I know Vivek comes from India. I've come from India, and it's easy if I say that, oh, this is where I worked. It's easy for people to understand. Back home.
mm.
But in a new country, I have to tell people what does this institute do, or
Mm,
what does this particular organization do, and what did I do into that. So I have to give them a background picture of it.
mm,
But that needs to be used, sparingly. These kind of examples must be used sparingly. If obviously, as said before, if someone has never worked due to their reasons, then if they get a chance for interview, I think interviewer already know
yeah.
that there is lack of experience there. So either you use example from your academics, to from your volunteering or any other community engagement, or any hobbies that you pursued, or any sports recreation, anything that you have done. You'll be able to draw some examples, but tell them.
Mm. I think also you want to, in that scenario, you actually do want to have really try and get a clear picture of what the job involves, not just from what's on the bit of paper, but what you'll be doing every day, who you'll be dealing with, what you're supposed to achieve, how you're supposed to do it. Try and get as much of a sense of that because you want if you when you bring an example from the outside, you always want to say why you're using why it's relevant. It's relevant because I'm dealing with the same sort of people. It's relevant because it's the same sort of environment. It's relevant because we have the same sort of challenges. But that does come from actually knowing, you know, thinking about what you're going to be doing on a day to day
Mm,
basis in that job, a deeper understanding than what's written as a responsibility, but actually, understanding you in that job, because then you can bring the right example from whatever part of your experience. So,
absolutely.
yeah, Vivek says, thanks a lot. So there you go. All right, just a couple more, and these were emailed to me today. I thought they were really good questions. How would you answer the question? Are you really sure wanting to join this company at this time, given the negative sentiment in the media about this company and the downturn?
But that I think that question, if you already knew those things and then also you decided to apply
The
for the
interview.
work, you got to
Yeah.
find your slant and your meaning to that.
Mm,
I think that's a very powerful question.
mm,
But that's a question that you have to really carefully think of. Why did you apply for the work?
mm,
Apart from money,
mm.
what's the reason for you to
Apart from the
apply
fact
for the
that they
work?
said come in for the interview.
That's right. That's right. You got. So then I don't know. I don't know. The background of the question, but you need to find your meaning to that.
Mm,
Your slant. People work into different careers, and people have done some remarkable work, and some really crappy work too. But they find a meaning to that. That's
mm,
what I've done. I don't regret that, because that was the call for at that time, and that's why I've done that. And you got to find your own meaning to it and
mm,
communicate that with that confidence that this is why,
mm.
despite of this negative media attention that the company is getting, these are my reasons for applying for the work.
I think it's an interesting question that people would ask because, like often in interviews, they basically paint a beautiful picture, right? They don't paint what's in all. But, when I was recruiting people, I would talk about the good and the bad, and then I'd see how people would respond to the bad. But what I was really looking at is A, do you understand the job? Like, do you have a very clear eyed picture about what the job is? But also, how does that impact what you're going to be doing? So, for example, if you're in a communications role and somebody says, are you really sure you want to join us because of all the bad publicity? You want to think about how you, like, what's your plan for being in that role? Like, how would you address anything that comes from that negative publicity? How have you done that in the past? Um, so have a think about if that's going on, what's the impact on your job, and how do you what's your plan of attack for you know counteracting that or turning that situation around? And I'd also have a lot of respect for the organisation that asks that question again because you don't want to go into a place like you hear so many stories of jobs that are sugar coated. They just tell you the great things about it, and it turns in that they are missing one critical piece of information that would have made the difference between you accepting the job or not. So, yeah, I think, but like Nashad says, you want to be in that interview knowing that scenario. So,
Yeah, unless it's a cryptocurrency job and you by the time you by the time you got there and they've just shaded 90% of their value, then you are in deep
it's
trouble.
like, I don't know if you'll be here next week for me to even answer that question. So, yeah. All right, one last question that came from the same person, which was around applying for a job where there's a significant time difference between where you're working and where your stakeholders are working. And how do you talk about, know that there'll be the requirement to be flexible, but you have some life boundaries that mean that you're probably not going to be operating in the same time zone as that person. How do you convey that you're going to be flexible, but also that you have boundaries?
Yeah. When I attended an interview, a few months back on, an organization that has got operations in Tokyo,
Mm,
in Bali, in Melbourne, and in Shanghai.
mm,
And the position was that, to work with these three, four stakeholders. And, they said, look, I said, I have no problem with doing that, but I understand that there's time in lieu or
mm,
flexibility available for me, and the support available for me that I can still do the full time job, and I can still take some time off if that's required for me
mm,
to do that. So in responding to that, I've not declined that. I said that's a great opportunity for me
mm,
to do that, but I'm also putting in a kind of question back to them that there will be support available in terms of taking in lieu time
mm,
off for me, or being able to reschedule appointment that aligns with my timetable here.
mm,
I think opening up the dialogue is important. That this
Mm,
is what I understand that the
mm,
organization would do, and then saying that what has been your experience with the previous
mm.
position? How
How did
has
you make
that
it work?
gone?
Yeah.
And I think that that's what happens. Now you don't want to kind of come across as that, because flexibility is just a word,
Mm,
right? It's not, unless you see the nuts and bolts of it. What organization consider flexibility and what you consider flexibility could be an absolute different thing,
mm,
right? You want flexibility, you can go and pick up your kids from the school. They said, look, that's not flexibility for us, right? You
mm,
can't do it every day. You
mm,
can only do it certain. So see, then you have to ask those questions that, how has it worked previously? What are
mm,
some of the things that you have done to
mm,
support someone in that position?
mm. Yeah. And also, I think come from the position that you're wanting to make it work. Like,
Hmm.
you know, interesting question. Very keen to make it work for both of us. These are where this is my blockout zone type thing. Um, but this is where I've made that work or how I've made that work in the past, like you're saying. So,
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
also with those sorts of things, sometimes you don't want to bring that up if nothing's been said, right? I wouldn't bring
Exactly.
that up in the first
Yeah.
interview. I would wait until they wanted me and we're
Exactly.
starting to discuss how we make this role work, basically, versus being
Exactly.
eliminated because you're bringing it up, you know, right from the start where it could work. You don't have the opportunity to discuss it. So yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think that's the end of my carefully prepared questions. So
And by the way, no, KB did not share these questions with me before.
I
Okay,
did.
these
I
are
put
all
them on the. I put them in the description.
last two
I'm there
questions
for
she
you to
did not share.
read.
They were impromptu questions. Yeah,
Mm,
to taste my
that's
knowledge.
right. Bingo.
Yeah.
Mm. Last, we've got another question from Vivek. Any pointers on
Uh-huh.
what to ask for? Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I
Yes.
think that's a good question too. But rather than going prepared with the question, you got to figure out what questions that you have really genuinely
Yeah.
that will allow you to make decision.
Mm,
You know, because I'm pretty sure that the recruiters or the hiring manager ask this question, they say, "Oh God, don't ask me about my culture. It's great here,
mm,
right? Everyone loves it, right?"
mm,
So I think rather than that, you think about what more question do I have,
mm,
or what other curiosity do I have that will help me to make my decision,
mm,
right? That they have not answered the question, such
mm,
as flexibility. Okay, so I know that in post-COVID world we talk about a lot of flexibility. Can you elaborate on what flexibility do you have? Like what sort
mm,
of, when you say flexibility, what does it mean for your
mm,
organization? So I want to understand that more,
mm,
right? So you bring questions which you personally have,
mm,
and that's something that your interaction in for 45 minutes, 1 hour, that decides what more question that you want to ask.
mm, mm,
And if your question's been already answered, you can say, look, it's great because I think I had 5 questions and you already answered all of them, so I don't have any more. But the only thing that I want to know, then you bring something else.
mm,
Ask one. You don't have to forcefully ask. No interviewer would reject you because you failed to ask questions.
mm. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What would you do if you have booked within a short period, or rather, sorry, I don't.
What would you do if you have leave booked, a holiday
Oh,
booked?
leave booked.
Leave.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good
Yeah.
one. Now it depends on how desperately do you want the job,
Mm,
right? Lot of questions being asked around that, whether you've got any long, booked right now or not. Now you got to be very. My view is that I will not hide.
mm,
Honestly, I'll be very very upfront about it, but I will not say that, oh, you know what, I've got 4 weeks booked, and no, it's not going to happen, right? So you got
mm,
you got to determine that, yes, I do have a holiday coming up. It's been planned for over 2 years, and it's my cousin's wedding, or we've already planned it. A lot of
mm,
people are not asking this question to to reject you, but they just want to figure out, right, that
mm,
if you've already planned a Europe holiday for 2 months and you are starting a new role, well, maybe you start once you finish, once you come
mm,
back. And so I think you don't have to kind of come across as too excitedly about holiday and oh I'm going and blah blah blah. But just say simply, yes, I do have a
mm,
holiday plan. If they ask that, oh, how many weeks? Then you tell them
mm,
it's planned for 2 weeks. And yes,
mm,
it was planned 6 months back, and I did not anticipate this interview.
mm,
But I can assure you that there'll be less disruption to my work,
mm,
something like
I think that's fair
that.
enough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, so we've answered the questions of the world, Nish. So,
Excellent.
yes, I think we should give ourselves a big tick each and tell people that they need to follow the hashtag career care package. They need to subscribe
Absolutely.
to the YouTube channel. They need to buy the cards against insanity. What else? You got the box? There you
There you
go.
go.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for attending 243rd episode of Career Care Package. We will be back again next week, Tuesday, 5:30 p.m., and we'll be talking about something interesting. If you want us to talk about any topic that you find it really difficult to talk, or you find it interesting, or you've got questions, as usual, our messages are open. Please drop me or Caroline a message, and I'll be more than happy to take it on.
Lovely. And until next week, we'll say goodbye. Stay safe, stay well, and go forth.
Bye,
Used to say
everyone.
stay inside. Bye, everyone.